Welcome back to another episode of the HallOfSportz podcast. Today we have a bit of a special podcast because we're starting up a little bit of a scouting special when kind of big stories come out. And one of the interesting ones as the January transfer window has been going on has been the transfer of Martin Ødegaard from Real Madrid to Arsenal. I have Jonas with me today because, again, I've followed you for a while, and anything to do with kind of Norwegian players is always really, really good to see kind of your perspective on it. And especially with this particular player, there's been a lot of kind of links in the past kind of couple of years since he moved to Real Madrid. So he kind of got very popular amongst kind of people around social media back when he was only about 15 years old. What is his background that you could tell people about?
Oh wow! Where do we start? He became a sensation at 15. I mean, he made his debut in Norwegian top flight at 15, and a young 15 at that. I believe it was early on in the year, because he's born in December. So I believe he made his debut around, what could it have been? April, May, something along those lines. And I believe he's the youngest player to ever play in the top flight, and I believe he's also the youngest goal scorer. He's the youngest national team player for Norway. He made his debut in Norway at 15, 16. So, I mean, he was a sensation in Norway. And it wasn't just that he was featured in games and sort of came on as a late sub. He was oftentimes the man of the match at 15, 16. He was living every teenage boy's dream. And with that came a lot of interest, obviously. There were interest from every of the big sides in the world. I mean, he had this famous world tour almost where he went and visited every single club to sort of audition for him and show his stuff, which became the stuff of legend, I suppose. And I mean, he trained with Man City. He was there with Man United, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Ajax. There were so many of these teams that just did everything they could to get him, and eventually he ended up choosing Real Madrid. And I believe he did so because, I mean, it was Real Madrid. I mean, no Norwegian player has gone from the Norwegian league to play for Real Madrid. Rather, no Norwegian had ever played for Real Madrid. So it was a huge thing. So yeah, he was a sensation, and it took some time for him to grow into that, I suppose, because he was so young, and everyone sort of wrote him off at age 17 almost, saying that he was a flop and he'd amount to nothing. And I mean, he was 17. I mean, his career hadn't even started yet. So he had his issues, or had his troubles, I should say, not his issues, but troubles at Castilla, which is the second team of Real Madrid, which basically is about 18, 19 players put together, and everyone is envious of one another because everyone wants to make the Real Madrid first team. And that's even more difficult when you're like, claimed to be the new Galactico, and you're signed and you have a big signing session, and it's like a big thing when you sign. So Ødegaard sort of had a bullseye on his back. And then he had some difficulties on loan at Heidenheim before he really smashed it at Vitesse. And obviously those who watch La Liga or have seen anything of La Liga last year would know that he was player of the month for September in La Liga. And basically, at least the first part of the season, was one of the best players in the league. So, and here we are. We went back to Real Madrid, and everything sort of collapsed for him a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I remember this story back in, I think it was 2015, when there was that kind of, as you mentioned, he was going around to a lot of the big clubs, training with them. I know, I think it went down to deadline day over in England, and there was rumors that Manchester United and Man City were really trying to get him in, and then eventually he signs for Real Madrid. Like you mentioned, it's a difficult one over in Madrid when there's this player that comes in, has to go into the Castilla team, because, as you mentioned, you have all these players that are vying just to get that debut for the first team, and you don't see too many of them actually make it. When you look at some of the good Real Madrid Castilla teams, there's a lot of those players that really don't get that many games under Madrid. Mm-hmm. And you looked at him, and the one thing that is very interesting is the one thing that I think he still holds the record of being the youngest player to start for Real Madrid. I think he was in that first spell. He got one of the games for them.
He got subbed in.
Yeah,
he was subbed in.
And he was only
subbed in for
15.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
That's probably the one thing that that summarizes that, or kind of compares that for anyone that follows United, is when Angel Gomez came on for Wayne Rooney. It's like that kind of, you have a legend of the club come off and this new player that people expect to do great things. And granted, I think it was always going to be one of those where he was going to go on loan a couple of times to kind of really see what he was about. And as you mentioned, I think it was that season last year with Real Sociedad where we really saw kind of him build into what type of player we would expect. I think the funny part about that season is he actually knocked Real Madrid out of the Copa del Rey. So I think that is,
and he scored. He scored as well in that game.
Exactly. So I think that one, because I have a lot of friends that are Real Madrid fans, and they were all, after seeing him play for Sociedad, they were actually very excited to see him come back. It just seems that him and Zidane don't have he just doesn't want him in that side. And it makes sense. There was a lot of rumors in January that Sociedad wanted him back, but Real Madrid didn't want to sell him, and hence he's now gone to Arsenal for the 6-month loan. How good do you think that is, as let's just say just for the player, first of all? How good is it that he gets to go into the Premier League for an Arsenal team that has been struggling offensively this season, that he can actually go out and kind of show what he can do on the big stage?
It's a good question. It all depends on how much he's playing. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the Arsenal side, yes, they've been struggling, but at the same time, they've started to click into gear a little bit now. And Emile Smith-Rowe has been fantastic for them, and they've changed. I mean, they started off the season with that 3-4-3 formation, which got found out a little bit, and now they've gone back to a 4-2-3-1 formation-ish, I suppose, or 4-3-3, all depending on how you view it. And it's good if he plays, and that's the big thing. He's going there to play. He wouldn't have gone anywhere else because, I mean, he was the 6th choice in the midfield for Real Madrid, so he has to play. And I would assume that he's been given some sort of guarantee or some sort of inkling that he's going to be playing for Arsenal. And I think, is that fair on the guys that have been doing so well for Arsenal as of late? I don't know. But then again, he would be viewed as a quite a big signing considering Mesut Ozil has gone out. So it's a tough one, because why would he go if he was not to play? And is he going to be a success there? And does he have what it takes? I think a lot of people are also underestimating the fact that that Norway is extremely Anglophile. I mean, we are born and raised watching the Premier League, perhaps even more so than watching our own league. A lot of us here do not take an interest in the domestic league because the Premier League is the end-all be-all for a lot of people. I think that's a little bit sad, but I digress. But that means that, and Martin Ødegaard is a Liverpool fan. He was born and raised a Liverpool fan. So he will know what the Premier League is all about. He will know what he's going to. But then again, he keeps changing clubs. He keeps going different places all the time, and he's not finding a home. So he has to go into a new locker room. He has to go into a new environment. He has to go to a new league, a new country. And even though it is a country and a league and a culture that perhaps suits him a little bit more in terms of what he's grown up around, because I would say that Norway and England are more similar than Norway and Spain. I'm not too sure how it's going. I mean, the loan is so short as well. It's a 6-month loan until the summer. So, I mean, if it was an 18-month loan, fine, I get it. But I would assume that there has to be some sort of mentioning of an extension, either of his current deal at Real Madrid or of this loan to Arsenal, or if there's a purchase option with a buyback for Real Madrid or something along those lines, because he could do it. He could obviously go into this Arsenal side and smash it. But then again, the odds are against him, considering he hasn't played that much and considering he's been struggling a little bit with injuries as well this season. So, and then again, if he has, I call it the Bruno Fernandes effect on Arsenal, Real Madrid are going to snatch him back, aren't they? Anyways, I mean, they're going to field him again. So I'm not sure if I see the reason for this, but then again, I mean, if he plays, then it's all positive for him, but then again, all negative for Arsenal if it doesn't work out. So it's a weird one to me, but then again, I suppose he had to go somewhere, and it seemed to me that after Real Sociedad wasn't going to be an option for him because number one, they signed David Silva, and number two, there was rumors or reports in Spain that Real Sociedad wanted a buy option, a permanent deal option in any loan, which Real Madrid just said flat out no to, and Arsenal are agreeing on a simple loan to take him to the Emirates for the remainder of the season, which I think was, I suppose, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I know those rumors in Spain over the past kind of 2 weeks. I know it started off with Sociedad, and from most of the kind of reports that came out is that they wanted either, as you mentioned, an option to buy the player or to buy the player in January. Because look, he played well for them last year, and it's always good to have options. The fact that he's going for a 6-month loan and there's no kind of rumor that it seems like it's just a straight 6-month loan and no buy option. It's kind of risky for Arsenal because you have it where if he does very well, you have it where maybe Madrid want him back, or if Arsenal want to extend it, if he plays well, then Madrid might be able to cash in for other teams that may want him and do a kind of Sergio Reguilon deal that we've seen with Tottenham, where he's basically there for 2 years. If he improves more than what Madrid expected, they can always bring him back. And then if they wanted to sell him, I know they did the same thing for Alvaro Morata as well when he played very well for Juventus. So it's a risky one because I think the only way it works in Arsenal's favour is if he plays okay, and then Madrid aren't too pushed to bring him back, and then Arsenal do like what he's brought to the team and possibly try and extend it. It's a weird one. I would have expected, like you said, maybe an 18-month loan to try and give him a little bit more time, because it doesn't help the player that he's there for 6 months and then could possibly have to go back to Madrid where he might not get game time or go somewhere else.
Definitely. And again, to loan a player and hope that it just does okay doesn't seem too feasible either. So, I mean, they needed to make up numbers with Mesut Ozil going, but then again, Mesut Ozil wasn't playing. So, I don't know. I mean, it's a spark. It's more depth in squad, I suppose. But then again, I think that you pretty much reflected a lot of my thoughts in terms of it becomes a showcase window for other clubs if he does well. I mean, and some other club will buy him. And then again, as you also said, Real Madrid selling players with buyback options is becoming the norm almost. At least if they're young and they could be prosperous in the future. I mean, you mentioned Morata, Reguilon, Mariano, Carvajal. There's so many players they've done that with, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ødegaard becomes part of that illustrious group.
Yeah, it's a weird one with Madrid at the moment because a lot of the stuff coming out is very negative about how the financial part of it isn't going too well, and that the players where they want to have stories out about it to kind of appease the fan base, because look, Madrid fans are used to these Galacticos coming in and nothing really happened last summer. Many people aren't expecting big transfers to happen coming in. So having these young players that aren't on the big wages that we look at, like Eden Hazard, we look at Gareth Bale, we look at Modric, who are on 200,000-400,000 per week. That really, this could be a chance. They're trying to get Ødegaard to be able to play regularly, but then also maybe long term, they have this plan to keep him. It's a difficult one. Let's forget about the actual just the 6-month loan. What skills does he have that can bring to this Arsenal side? We've mentioned that there's been some good players recently that we've seen some good performances, especially from the young players from Arsenal. So what can he bring that might add on to that? Because as we know, that Arsenal need to continue kind of improving over the last few weeks and not kind of revert back to where they were at the beginning of the season.
Well, I mean, he's a playmaker. He's someone who can glue the team together. He has a wonderful left foot, and I mean, he's able to find space in between the lines. But he needs freedom. He needs to be given creative control. Obviously, he's underrated defensively, if you ask me. He hasn't been able to show it too much at Real Madrid, but he was very good at it at Real Sociedad, and for the Norwegian national team, he does it as well. A lot of tracking back and being, a part both offensively and defensively. But it's so vital to him to be in touch with the ball, to be around the ball, and to be able to control the game with the ball more so than being the one that runs into space and so forth and so on. He's excellent at threading through passes. So having runners like Bukayo Saka and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang on each side, for example, or the full backs that overlap, that's going to be his bread and butter. So I think in terms of threading through passes and being someone who will be available to receive passes and turn into areas, he's world class at doing that on his day, anyways. So I mean, he'll give Arsenal something to smile about in terms of being able to thread the midfield and the attack together. And I think that's sort of his main strength, as well as being pretty good with set pieces. He takes corners, he takes free kicks. He has a good crosser of the ball. So obviously he's. I've said he's. I'm not going to compare them because one is so much bigger than the other one as of right now. But in terms of style and in terms of the player that I think of when I see him, I always say it's like seeing David Silva. But so that's the type of player. But then again, David Silva is big. So let's see, and let's hope that perhaps he can grow into that sort of stature in European football, but that's going to take some doing.
Yeah, the other thing that we talk about is him coming into the Premier League, which we see there's not many players that are able to take to the Premier League, like we mentioned earlier with Bruno Fernandes, because we see a lot of players that they take time. The issue for him is that he doesn't have time. He has 6 months to try and lay his marker down. So coming into this kind of very physical, tough league, especially for attacking players, what are some of those areas that he's going to need to improve on over the next few months to really kind of lay down a marker that this is someone that Arsenal need to try and look at for a longer period than just 6 months?
He needs to score more goals, first and foremost. I think he needs to be more vital in terms of contributing with goals himself. I mean, he's a decent finisher, and his free kicks are good. He scored from direct free kicks as well. But I think that one thing that he needs to improve on is that he's able to get the space in between the lines, and from the 18 yards and out, he's able to get the ball pretty much freely. And I mean, if he had a shot on him, a la, for example, Christian Eriksen, to compare with someone else who's from Scandinavia, I mean, he'd be one of the best players in that position in the world.
Yeah.
And some would argue that he already is one of the best players in this position in the world, and that's without his shots. I mean, imagine him with a shot on him. So I mean, that's one of the things, and he also needs to figure a way to stay healthy, to be quite honest, because he keeps getting injured, and he's still young, yes, but then again, if he's going to keep being injured, he's going to miss games, and he's going to have a herky-jerky type of career. He's going to not be able to be given that run of games that he desperately needs and able to get into shape, because he's one of those players that plays himself into shape. I mean, if he has 2 or 3 bad games, he needs the 4th game as well, the 3rd game as well, to be able to show that number one, that he has the confidence, and number 2, that he can commit mistakes and still be a vital figure. And that's something he showed for Real Sociedad, that he was able to even though he had a game or 2 that was bad, the 3rd one, the 4th one was always going to be great. And eventually he played himself into consistency, and he was able to deliver on a consistent basis. So that is both a strength and a weakness of his, that he needs that many games and then he's able to contribute on regular consistency. But I'm going to say, and as well, I think he needs to beef up a little bit. He is pretty athletic. He has beefed up a bit since his early days. But then again, I think that if he had a couple of pounds more on him in terms of muscle, I don't think that it would hurt him too much. So I think those are his main weaknesses, and And I just keep thinking all the time that if he had a shot on him, if he was able to shoot from distance and be accurate and have the power in him to do it, wow, he'd be unstoppable.
Yeah, it's surprising that didn't improve at Real Madrid when you look at some of the players that he would have been training with, and you would think that would have improved. When it comes down to kind of the physical side, you mentioned that he's athletic. He needs to. Maybe it would have been better for him if he actually went to a team like Bayern Munich at the start, who you've seen they've been able to make a lot of their young players look like these kind of athletic specimens when they move up that team. So it is an interesting one in terms of when we think of him kind of long term. Could you see him being in the Premier League for a long period of time, or does he suit maybe the kind of quicker leagues like La Liga? Because we saw he had success at Real Sociedad. Yeah. Do you think he would be more suited to that? Or do you think, because we've mentioned with the injuries that he's picked up, I know he's gotten a couple of injuries with his tendons in his knee, and that can often be a bit of a worry because those are ones that tend to kind of come up time after time. Yeah. So is playing in the Premier League, will this really be a good test to see where he's at physically and also if he can actually suit to a league like this?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, he's going to try the Premier League, so obviously we're going to get the answer if he's suited for it. But I think the whole thing about Premier League being this physically dominant, fantastic sort of league is I mean, it's not true. And this thing about Spain being tippy tappy and the ref blows for everything, and it's not true either. So I think the leagues are in some aspects very similar. In some aspects they're not similar at all, because I think in Spain, one thing that they perhaps don't do is they don't favor the same. I suppose England is more direct than Spain. There's some teams in Spain that play incredibly direct as well, such as Atletico Madrid, Getafe, Athletic Club. They all play very, very direct. But I think in the Premier League, you see many teams that play a lot more direct than you do in Spain. So perhaps it helps him that he's going to be playing a more direct type of football. But then again, I think you have to look at it more so than Real Madrid is. They are number one. They are playing for Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Juventus, Inter, all the PSG, all these teams. It takes a different type of player, different type of mentality. And with all due respect to Arsenal, I mean, they haven't been up there for quite a while. I mean, we have to go back almost 20 years now since they were really, really, really in the title race. So I suppose the level has been dropped a little bit from Arsenal, and that's sad, because I remember Arsenal from my childhood being Patrick Vieira and Thierry Henry, and I mean the fantastic sides that they had. I mean, Robert Pires, Freddie Ljungberg. It was fantastic sides. So I'm not sure. I mean, does he have the Real Madrid mentality, the elite mentality? I think he's able to develop it. I think he'll be able to develop it, but I'm not sure if this came a little bit too soon for him, because we have to remember he was supposed to stay 2 years at Real Sociedad. He was supposed to be there for 2 years, but there were two reasons why he didn't do it. And number one was because he was so good for a large chunk of the season of last season at Real Sociedad. And number two was COVID-19. And as you alluded to earlier, Real Madrid weren't able to buy players, so they had to cut costs, and they had to find some ways to sort of improve their squad, or at least refurbish it a little bit. And the easiest way to do so was to bring him back and pay the penalty fee they had to pay to Real Sociedad. So it was more easy for them to do that than to go out and try and buy Paul Pogba or Eduardo Camavinga or someone like that. So for his sake, I think it came a little bit too soon for him. But I do think that he'll be able to develop into an incredibly good player, because he is a good player. But it's one thing to be a good player for Real Sociedad, and it's a different thing to be a good player for Real Madrid. But I do think that Arsenal perhaps places somewhere in between Real Sociedad and Real Madrid. So it could be that you could view it as a step up, but then again, a step down. Step down from Real Madrid, step up from Real Sociedad.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we'll end on that kind of point of mentality to develop that mentality that you need to be at one of those big clubs that we mentioned. Is it that he needs to be at one of those clubs to develop it, or can he develop kind of that winning mentality by being one of the better players at kind of a lower level than the likes of Madrid, Manchester United, Man City, Inter, Juventus? It's a tough one.
Yeah, because I think you can ask Eden Hazard about that one, because if you look at Eden Hazard, I mean, he was everything at Chelsea. He was the star at Chelsea. And one of the things that he's been, that has been the thing against him now, he's been very injured at Real Madrid. That's one thing. But then again, he's also seemed that he's lacked motivation. Seemed like he's not been able to sort of live up to the hype. And I mean, 100 million euros from Chelsea to Real Madrid, and he's not be able to pay that back in any way, shape, or form. And shape being a key word, because that's one of the things that people are knocking him for, that he's at times not looked in shape at all. And that is down to mentality. I mean, if you don't have the mentality of Real Madrid, of this is Santiago Bernabeu, this is me, becoming the new king there, I don't think that you're ever going to be able to get it, at least at his age. Then again, Martin Ødegaard is several years younger than Eden Hazard, so I think that he still has time to develop it. But it's a very good question. It's a very good question. Whereas do you have to be there, or do you have to go somewhere else and then develop it and come back and have it? Because if you look at all the purchases Real Madrid have done with young players as well, there's not a single one that's playing full or all the time, with the exception of maybe Mendy, but he's the only one, and that's because Marcelo has just dropped so much in level. So, but if you look at it, I mean, Militao, you have Jovic, you have Rodrigo, you have Vinicius Jr., you have Federico Valverde, you have so many players that are young and that are extremely promising, but they're not able to be sufficiently good over a sufficient amount of time, because at Real Madrid you cannot drop off. You cannot play 2-3 games bad. No, you're out. You're gone. Look at Isco. Isco's on the bench. That's Isco. He was, a couple of years ago we were talking about him as the best playmaker in the world, and now he's barely getting a look in the squad. So I think it's an incredibly tough one to answer, but I think he needs to at least show, I assume, a bit more maturity in terms of being able to go back to Santiago Bernabeu. And to his credit, he was supposed to do that over the course of 2 years, but he was thrown back into it after 1 year. And then he was asked to replace Luka Modric. And Luka Modric showed that he wasn't ready to be replaced, because he's been playing some of his best football this season. And then Ødegaard struggled with injuries and not been given, the chances that he would have been given in his second year at Real Sociedad. So I think it's been a thing of too much too soon for him. But then again, I'm not quite sure if he's the one to blame for the most part, considering Real Madrid decided to bring him back.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like we mentioned that for some of the young players from Madrid, and we haven't seen kind of that elite mentality that you have for some of the older players that were there. And especially it's quite surprising, considering some of these young players were there when you had the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo there, who we know is, as all the stories that have come out from his early time at Manchester United, is that mentality is what set him apart from everybody else. And it's a shame that he's not getting that Ronaldo's not still there, because he's one of those that kind of sets the culture of a team. And for those young players, it's no surprise that there's many of those young players that don't seem to quite get what it means to be a Real Madrid player. And it's a tough one. As we said, there's many cases that you can kind of look at different teams, why players work out, why they don't. A lot of it comes down to, do they take the chance when they're given it? And it's been difficult. Injuries, and also, like you said, he was expecting to develop for 2 years at Real Sociedad and he was brought back early. So hopefully for his own case, that he can have a successful 6 months at Arsenal, because another 6 months of him not getting kind of regular game time or not developing as a football player, and then having to come back to Real Madrid won't do himself any good.
I agree.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today. It was really interesting to just kind of get some of the little snippets about the player, because again, many people would have seen kind of him at Sociedad and saw the odd few games, but it's good to kind of get that background to see what type of player that Arsenal should expect in the next 6 months. So I really appreciate you joining me today.
My pleasure. And to anyone who's wondering, his name is pronounced Martin Ødegaard. So it's not Ødegaard, it's Ødegaard.
That's going to be a very interesting when we hear all the different commentators over in England try to pronounce it.
I've already tried to teach the Spanish people it, but they're not able to. So I'm saying it now to you guys in England. Please, Ødegaard. It was like Lindegaard when he was there as well, when he played for Man United. So
yeah,
Ødegaard. There you go.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that, Jonas.
Thank you.